Last Christmas, while my brother unwrapped the keys to our family's restaurant, a business worth over $500,000, I stared down at my gift, a $20 work planner from Target. My parents beamed at him like he just won the lottery. Then Mom turned to me with that practice smile and said, "I should be grateful because practical gifts show we care about your future." My brother smirked from across the room, already texting photos of his new empire to his friends. That moment sitting there with discount office supplies in my lap while he got everything wasn't just another slap in the face. It was the beginning of the most satisfying year of my life. Growing up in a suburb outside of Seattle, I learned early that love in our family came with conditions, and I apparently never met them. Every soccer game my brother played, both parents were front row with signs and snacks. My debate team nationals. Dad had a work thing. Mom had a headache. When college applications rolled around, they paid his full tuition to a private university in California without blinking. I got a handshake and advice to look into scholarships because they'd already stretched themselves thin with HICE expenses. I did look into scholarships. I worked 2 part-time jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I graduated debt-free through sheer determination, landed a position at a consulting firm in Chicago, and climbed my way to senior analyst by 30. I bought my own condo, drove a car I paid for myself, and built a life that nobody could take credit for except me. Every achievement felt hollow, though, because my parents' praise was always lukewarm at best, followed quickly by updates on my brother's latest venture. And oh, there were ventures. He'd opened a food truck that folded within 3 months, started a lifestyle brand that never sold a single product, invested in cryptocurrency schemes that evaporated overnight. Each failure came with a parental bailout check and reassurances that he was finding himself and learning valuable lessons. When I suggested maybe he should get a regular job to build some actual work experience, my mother looked at me like I'd suggested he join a cult. "Your brother is an entrepreneur," she'd said, voice dripping with reverence. "He thinks bigger than a cubicle." Our family restaurant had been the heart of our community for 35 years. My grandparents had started it as a small Italian place on the corner of Pike and Madison, serving recipes brought over from Naples. It survived recessions, neighborhood changes, and the rise of chain restaurants through consistent quality and genuine relationships with customers. Regulars knew they'd get the same perfect lasagna every Sunday, the same warm greeting from my parents, the same sense of coming home. It wasn't flashy, but it was profitable, stable, and beloved. It represented everything my grandparents had dreamed of when they came to America. Sunday dinners at that restaurant were mandatory growing up. The extended family would crowd into the back room, and without fail, the conversation orbited around my brother, his ideas, his potential, his charm. I'd sit there pushing pasta around my plate while aunts and uncles asked him about his plans and asked me if I was still doing that computer thing. When I got promoted to director level, earning 6 figures and managing a team of 12, my dad mentioned it once at Sunday dinner, then immediately pivoted to how my brother was networking with some very important people in Los Angeles. The favoritism wasn't even subtle. It was broadcast in high definition at every family gathering, every holiday, every phone call. My brother was the golden child, destined for greatness, deserving of every advantage. I was the responsible one, the one who didn't need help, the one who should just be grateful to be part of such a loving family. When my grandmother passed away and left us both $5,000, my parents convinced me to give mine to my brother for another failed business idea, because he needed it more. I was 25 and still paying off student loans. He was 27 and living rent-free in their basement. So when I saw those restaurant keys in his hands that Christmas morning, I wasn't surprised. I was just done. My brother took ownership of the restaurant in January with the confidence of someone who'd never actually run a business successfully. His first move was firing 3 longtime employees, including Maria, who'd been head chef for 15 years and knew every recipe by heart. He told my parents it was about restructuring for efficiency, but really Maria had made the mistake of suggesting his ideas needed more thought. He replaced her with a culinary school graduate he'd met at a networking event who specialized in fusion cuisine and molecular gastronomy. The second move was hiring a social media marketing team for $3,000 a month. Suddenly, our family's Instagram account was full of moody photos of deconstructed tiramisu and captions about elevating traditional Italian cuisine for the modern palate. He brought in an interior designer who ripped out the warm rustic decor my grandparents had chosen and replaced it with industrial lighting, concrete floors, and uncomfortable metal chairs. The renovation cost $70,000, all financed through a business loan my parents co-signed. Then came the menu changes. My brother decided the Classic recipes were dated and unsophisticated. He added truffle oil to everything, turned the simple margarita pizza into something, with burrata foam and microgreens, and priced everything 30% higher. The regular customers, families who'd been coming every week for decades, started disappearing. They'd come in expecting Sunday gravy and garlic bread, and instead got told about chef's contemporary interpretation of traditional flavors. I heard about all this through the grapevine. Former employees reached out to me on LinkedIn. Restaurant suppliers my parents had known for years called to vent. Even some of the regulars contacted me through Facebook to ask what was happening. I didn't engage. This wasn't my circus. Wasn't my monkeys. I'd been excluded from every decision, every conversation about the business's future. So I certainly wasn't going to insert myself into the disaster now. My parents had made their choice about who was capable and who wasn't. By March, the reviews were brutal. Yelp and Google were flooded with one-star complaints about small portions, high prices, and food that didn't taste like the restaurant we loved anymore. My brother's response was to blame the customers. He posted a long Instagram story about how some people aren't ready for innovation and how he was raising the culinary bar in Seattle. He hired a PR consultant for $5,000 to manage online reputation instead of, actually listening to feedback and fixing the problems. The financial bleeding was catastrophic. Revenue dropped 40% in the first quarter. The expensive new chef quit after 2 months when paychecks started bouncing. Suppliers started demanding payment up front because the restaurant's credit was shot. The social media team disappeared once their invoices went unpaid. My brother responded to each crisis by throwing more borrowed money at Band-Aid solutions instead of addressing the fundamental problem. He had no idea what he was doing. My parents called me in April, voices tight with stress. They tried to hide. Just wanted to check in, see how I was doing, maybe get together for lunch soon. I knew something was wrong. My mother never just checked in without an agenda. I let them dance around it for 20 minutes. Before my dad finally cracked, the restaurant was in trouble. Serious trouble. They'd refinanced their house to cover some of the debt. But it wasn't enough. The bank was making noises about calling the loan. Creditors were circling. My brother was overwhelmed and needed support. We were thinking, my mother said carefully. Since you're so good with numbers and finances, maybe you could help out. Maybe even invest a little. Consider it a family loan. I let the silence stretch out. Through my condo window, I could see Lake Michigan glittering in the spring sunshine. I'd worked so hard for this life, this independence, this freedom from needing anything from them. And now they wanted me to hand over my hard-earned money to fix the mess they'd created by giving everything to someone who'd never earned anything. No, I said simply. The explosion was immediate. My father's voice went cold in that way that used to terrify me as a kid. This is family, not some business transaction. We're talking about your grandparents' legacy, everything they built. How can you be so selfish? Selfish? That word hung in the air like poison. I'd spent my entire childhood being responsible, being independent, being the one who didn't need anything so they could pour everything into my brother. And now I was selfish for having boundaries. Let me get this straight, I said, keeping my voice level. You gave him a business worth over $500,000. I got a planner. He's run it into the ground in 4 months through incompetence and ego, and now I'm selfish for not bailing him out with money I earned myself. My mother jumped in with the guilt. He's your brother. Blood is thicker than water. We're family and family helps each other. What would your grandmother think if she knew you were letting her restaurant die? Grandma would think you should have given the restaurant to someone competent. I shot back. Or at least someone who respected what she built enough not to trash it for Instagram likes. They demanded I come home for a family meeting. I almost refused, but morbid curiosity won out. I wanted to see this train wreck up close. I flew to Seattle on a Friday, rented a car, and drove to my parents' house in Bellevue. The Sunday dinner crowd was there. My parents, my brother and his wife, 2 aunts, an uncle, an intervention. Basically with me as the target. My brother looked terrible. The cocky smirk was gone, replaced with dark circles and a defensive hunch to his shoulders. His wife looked like she'd been crying. My parents looked 10 years older than Christmas. The aunts and uncle wore expressions of concern mixed with judgment. My dad opened with a 45-minute presentation using actual PowerPoint slides about the restaurant's history, its community importance, and the financial situation. Charts showed their revenue collapse. Photos showed the empty dining room. He ended with a funding proposal. If I invested $150,000, they could restructure the debt, return to the original menu, and get back on track. My brother would stay on his owner but bring in a professional manager. It was a chance to save our heritage. And what do I get? I asked. Besides the warm, fuzzy feeling of fixing someone else's mistakes, you'd be a part owner, my dad said. 25% equity. A loft actually laughed. So I pay $150,000 for a quarter of a failing business that you gave him for free and he keeps control. That's your pitch? My brother exploded. I knew you'd be like this. You've always been jealous, always resentful that mom and dad saw my potential. You can't stand that I got the restaurant because you know you could never run it. You're just a corporate drone who thinks money makes you better than everyone else. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I'm a corporate drone who earned everything I have, I said quietly. You're a 32-year-old man who's never succeeded at anything without mommy and daddy's checkbook. The difference is when I fail, I face consequences. When you fail, you just hold out your hand for another bailout. His wife started crying harder. My mother called me cruel. My father said I was destroying the family. The aunts and uncles sat frozen, clearly regretting their attendance. My brother called me a heartless witch. Said I'd regret this, that family would remember how I abandoned them. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. You want to know what I regret? I turned back. I regret every time I made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. Every time I swallowed my hurt so you could pretend everything was fair. Every time I told myself the favoritism was in my head. I'm done regretting. I'm done enabling, and I'm definitely done funding his failures. I walked out to my rental car while my mother shouted after me about forgiveness and family bonds. Their restaurant closed in July. Not with a bang, but with a quiet bankruptcy filing and a going out of business sale. My brother got a job at a logistics company, something entry-level with a supervisor and actual accountability. His wife's parents helped them with rent after my parents couldn't anymore, having depleted their retirement savings on the bailout attempts. The building where my grandparents' restaurant had stood for 35 years became a Thai fusion place within 6 months. My parents didn't speak to me for 2 months. Then my mother called, voice small and tired, and said they needed to talk. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, neutral territory. They looked diminished somehow. The righteous anger burned away to leave only exhaustion. My father apologized first, halting and uncomfortable. He said they'd been unfair, that they'd enabled my brother's worst traits while taking me for granted. My mother cried and said she was sorry for the work planner, for all the times they'd minimized my achievements, for expecting me to fix everything while giving me nothing. I didn't forgive them immediately. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. But I accepted the apology and agreed to rebuild our relationship slowly with clear boundaries. No more expectations that I'd fund family emergencies. No more comparisons to my brother. No more guilt trips about family loyalty being one-directional. My brother never apologized. He posts occasional passive-aggressive things on social media about fake family and people who value money over relationships. I don't engage. I don't need to. His resentment is his problem, not mine. That work planner, the one that started everything, I actually used it. I filled it with goals that had nothing to do with earning my parents' approval. It planned a trip to Italy, tracked my investment portfolio growth, scheduled therapy sessions to unpack decades off feeling less than. Every page was a reminder that my worth wasn't determined by their recognition. Last month, I got promoted to vice president. I celebrated alone with expensive wine and zero need to share the news with anyone who wouldn't genuinely celebrate with me. My parents sent flowers, a small gesture that felt sincere. My brother sent nothing, and that felt perfectly fine. Sometimes the best gift is learning you don't need their approval to succeed. If this story hit home for you, drop a comment below about your own experiences with family dynamics and setting boundaries. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want more real stories about standing up for yourself and breaking free from toxic patterns, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for listening.